Welcome back to the People Data for Good podcast. I'm Al Adamsen, and in this episode, I talk with my longtime friend and colleague, Serena Huang. Serena has done extraordinary things over the course of her career. She is not only a practitioner in people analytics, she's an educator, she's an influencer. Her generosity of spirit comes through in this interview. I know it will be both inspiring and informative. She has a unique background which has informed her lens by which she views this work. Again, I can say more, but I'll get out of the way now and let you enjoy the discussion with Serena Huang. Serena, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you, Al?
I'm doing great to be talking with you. You're there in Chicago today, yeah?
Yes, I am. And
Hey, well,
yourself?
I'm here in Santa Cruz, and I mean, we've been talking about doing this for quite a while, and you and I have been connected for many years, most recently through Northwestern's Taurayos group. And,
Yes.
you've done some amazing things, including created a course on LinkedIn, and you're at PayPal right now. So if you would, introduce yourself and share a little bit about, your background.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. It's
Of course.
so great to be on the show. And I know you have a huge community, so excited to share a bit more about people analytics today. Well, I am the head of people analytics, visualization, HR tech at PayPal. In addition to the world's longest job title, probably, I am also now a LinkedIn learning instructor of a brand new course called The Data Science of Using People Analytics. And I have been accepted into the LinkedIn Creator Accelerator program. So, two more things to add to the day job. It's been really exciting. I would say what got me here is just a sense of curiosity. And I've always loved the combination of human capital and data analytics. That's kind of how I got into people analytics. Some of you who've been following me might know that economics is my background. You may not know, though, that I specialize in labor economics, which is the economics related to people. So I spent a few years in consulting, and when GE had reached out to me about doing something called HR analytics, mind you, this is many years ago, I thought, wow, these are not two words that really go together typically. Uh, and I was up for a challenge. I thought, if I didn't like it, I could always go back to consulting. Fast forward many, many years, I have now built people analytics functions from the ground up after GE at Coke Industries, Kraft Heinz, and now at PayPal. So covering lots of different industries and had the pleasure of seeing the function really mature. And initially when I started out, we were doing basic reporting at best. There was some visualization, some dashboards, and now we have machine learning models. So big difference in how we apply data analytics. And I had such a pleasure learning myself. And traditionally kind of trained in stats. I later learned all the data science and AI and programming in Python on my own. So you'll probably hear me talk about learning a ton as well in general. And it's really important to me as a leader in data analytics too.
Well, that's I've had the joy of watching you develop over your career, and
Yeah.
there's several adjectives that come to mind. And first and foremost, you're kind. You have a very humanistic approach, and you also are creative. Every time we talk, I'm like, "Are you doing something new? Or you created something, new project here?" So I want to go back up and you find out your inspirations for getting into the field. And you mentioned labor economics, and did you just wake up one day and say, "Hey, this is what I want to do"? So, where did you grow
Yeah.
up? What's your story?
Sure. As I think about my story, I came to this country when I was young. I did not speak a word of English. So sort of after middle school, I moved to the Midwest of America, where there was at the time no programs on English as a second language, or sort of dropped into public high school, and good luck with that. So my favorite class was actually Spanish, because unlike all the other classes where I felt like I was really behind, I had to learn a new language and whatever subject was in Spanish, everyone in my class was in the same playing field. We were all starting from zero. So that was my favorite class, and that's why I speak a little bit of Spanish. And I think my memory of that time was that everything was so difficult initially, but I took up the challenge to quickly learn and immerse myself and ask myself, how can I quickly get up to speed? So while other students were, maybe playing, I had a lot of studying to do because I was, like I said, learning a new language. And then fast forward a few years later, I was choosing between different majors. I took a ton of classes, and something else about me is I'm very experimental. I like to try new things and then see what I like. What I found is I learned a lot about what I don't like as well along the way. And I ended up choosing economics as a major because it was a course I absolutely loved. I just loved the professor and how applied everything was. And it was sort of like the beauty of combining data and the real world. So I fell in love with economics, believe it or not, and later came across labor economics as an elective and absolutely loved the topic around inequality as a concept. And so we had talked about obviously your traditional gender inequality, but then also the difference between someone who maybe was born in the US and those who were born outside the US and had to learn something new, like myself when I was younger. And I just found the topic fascinating and ended up doing a whole graduate degree and focusing on immigration for my dissertation years later. So that's kind of how I got into labor economics. The funny story is I had actually intended to go into the academia,
Yeah.
much like everyone else who went, and gone to a PhD program. I graduated soon after the last huge recession, and where all the academic positions were being cut because of budget issues. So I had to be safe, right? I needed a real job as these jobs were getting canceled. So I applied pretty wide and ended up really enjoying the consulting interview process. I thought, oh, I could apply data analytics instead of trying to publish and take forever and only maybe my best friends would read my article. I could actually do this and see the results immediately. And I kind of told myself, you know what, I could always go back to teaching. I definitely have the passion, as you can hear, and I never did that. However, after I've been in the private sector for a little bit, my friends in academia would invite me back and say, "Can you come back to campus and teach these?" Young ones a little something that's more practical in addition to the theoretical approach that I teach. So I've always enjoyed going back to campus, and hence, the Northwestern event was always such a pleasure. And now that's actually one of the reasons why I created a LinkedIn Learning course is I realized I could not go to so many campuses. I mean, this year, I've been to Northwestern, of course, Kellogg, Wharton, Berkeley, and the list goes on. I'm starting to have to say no. Find me next year. Perhaps we'll have time. So I thought about how do I share knowledge and my passion at scale. Something that the students have told me along the way that resonate with them is that I'm able to share real case studies.
Mhm.
How does this really work? When you go talk to your chief privacy officer about rolling out something in people analytics, what do you need to say? So those are practical examples that you won't find in textbooks. And so my material really supplement the lectures that my friends were giving in the university setting. And now I'm excited to be able to share that on a platform like LinkedIn with 850 million users. So it doesn't get more scale, I guess, than that.
No, it's super exciting, and you're immensely qualified, and you have that inclusive way about you that if I'm listening to you even right now, I'm like, all right, tell me more. And if you're exuding that among your learners, then that's a fantastic thing to do. So, there's a couple things that I come to mind. And first off, before we get too far down the road on people analytics, I want to ask, where did your parents come from? Did they bring you, and at what age, what country?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
My parents are from Taiwan, and they brought me and then they left me here. So this might this might need to be a whole nother story, but I'll give you the shorter version. My dad was a visiting scholar, and so lots of PhDs in the family.
Mhm.
So he had an opportunity to take a sabbatical and go to a university. So we came as a family, and we did that for a year. And when we were going to go back, I had actually started to make friends in the US. And I told my parents that I wanted to stay. And they said, absolutely not. You can't, you're not old enough to drive. You can't take care of yourself. And I was so determined. I had made an argument that I wanted to continue to learn the culture, the language. I was just getting started. And because I wanted to go to, if not undergrad, at least graduate school in the US, I made the argument that I would be better off and I would have a better chance if I had stayed and finished off my high school. And again, my dad said, absolutely not, no way, and tried to convince me. So every night we would take a walk after dinner and he would present his arguments. I would present my counter arguments, very data driven as well on success rates of, child immigrants who stay and so on. And then finally he said, look, this is not happening. You need to come back home. I can't leave you behind. So he gave me an impossible, he thought, condition. He said, if you can find an American family that I approve in the next 7 days, and I'll have to visit their home, talk to them, obviously, who can take you in, then I will agree to let you stay. Mind you, that I actually have family on the West Coast in California, and I chose not to go that way because I wanted to learn uh, English language properly. So instead of
No
speaking,
offense.
right, no offense to anyone
Yeah.
from California.
Yeah.
Great place. I just came back from there. So then my dad gave me this condition, and this was pre-Google days, pre-iPhone days, right? I literally went to campus, like to libraries, to talk to strangers, to find friends at my age and ask their parents, really network. So this is how I learned networking, I suppose, at a very young age, to find help. And eventually was able to find a professor at the local university who hosted international students before, and that person just left. So they had an empty bedroom and they had experience and they had a nice and their daughter was actually my classmate, so it didn't get better than that considering I only had 7 days. So I told my dad, I did the impossible, you gotta let me stay. And he kept his word. He kept his word, and that's how I ended up staying in the Midwest and
That is
learned a
incredible.
lot.
That is
So
incredible. I mean, just your tenacity and creativity and resilience. I mean, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Now, how
yeah.
old were you? What year were you in high
14.
school?
I
You
was
were
14. Yeah.
14.
Yes, I was
I
14.
I got to talk to your dad. Where's your
Exactly.
dad?
Exactly.
As a fellow father of a daughter, I
Right. Can you
both I
imagine?
both like part of me is like, what were you thinking? And part of me is like, congratulations for trusting and empowering your daughter to
Yeah.
take that step. Because I imagine that is directly related to the fortitude that you now express today in your
Yeah.
work. So.
Definitely. Anytime I run into something difficult in people analytics, in sharing data insights that no one wanted to hear, I ask myself what that 14-year-old Serena would do. Because if I could do it then, I can do it now.
Well, I love the creativity and resourcefulness as well. It's just like you're right. I mean, to tell a 14-year-old uh, that go do that. Good luck.
Right.
Provide no resources, and the fact that you were able to deliver on that for yourself. That self advocacy that is it says a lot about who you are, and kind of at least for me, like, okay, no wonder you're doing what you're doing, and influencing the way that you are, because you do have that creativity and resourcefulness. So with
Thank you.
that, this is in Kansas. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
And then you went to university in Lawrence, yeah?
Yes,
Yeah, you
yes.
tell us about that?
Oh, oh gosh. I hope listeners like basketball because it was
I
definitely in
was
everyone's
actually hoping, I was silently hoping that you were
right.
gonna
It's in the water, it's in the air, it's in the blood. It's just everywhere. It was amazing to be in Lawrence. The campus is obviously gorgeous for anyone who hasn't been there. And like I said, basketball is everywhere. I stayed there until I joke about how I couldn't finish and leave town until we won a national championship again, which we fortunately did. And the town just went wild. I was already in a PhD program at the time, and I told my advisor, I said, "You gotta let me go. We won the championship. It's time to graduate now." So yeah, so I chose to stay at Kansas for my graduate school because I was offered a really amazing scholarship I could not turn down. It was literally like, take as long as you want. We will pay for the tuition, give you a stipend. You can either be a research assistant or teaching assistant. And I had a advisor who I really enjoy working with. And then I ended up getting a fellowship, a very rare fellowship from the Sloan Foundation that funded my dissertation, where I didn't actually have to work and could just focus on writing. So it was a great time. I mean, at the time, of course, it felt really difficult, challenging, and every day had to write. It seems like I don't know how many thousands of words to get things done. But now, in hindsight, that was simpler times, Al.
Yeah,
Simpler times.
yeah, yeah, a
I
little
had
bit
one
more
thing to
linear.
worry about.
Yeah, I'm right. Doing a project and just get that done and move on. So you
Yeah.
completed your dissertation and completed your PhD work. What happened then?
So yeah,
And you
like I
win your national
said,
championship.
right, right. I got all the t-shirts I
Yeah.
needed. And by the way, I got more t-shirts earlier this year. As you know, we also won the NCAA this year. So yeah, so I went into consulting, like I said, after that, doing labor and employment litigation consulting. So if there's a chance to try out your resilience and your data analytics skills all at the same time, that's probably the job. So my very first clients in my consulting career were attorneys. So if you thought anyone who's in consulting had a tough client, all my clients were attorneys. So looking at the rigor in the analytics we needed to provide, because we're essentially, could anyone on the team could be deposed, or we might have to go to court. So you have to have really sound analysis that maybe the other side will try to take apart depending on your position. So we had a lot of fun in the data analytics, but also, gosh, I would say if I were to make a T-shirt for my time in litigation consulting, is people lie and data doesn't. So
Mm.
there was a lot of fascinating cases where employees might claim something, and then the data says otherwise. Where manager would claim something, and then the data would say something completely different. And that's when I started to realize the true power of data. And it continues today. A lot of work that we do as a team is separating what is noise and what is fact. Like I said, in litigation consulting setting, the bars are very high and stakes are really high. Millions, sometimes billions at stake. But the same principle applies, that data can help you separate what's noise from what's fact.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I'm just gonna synthesize that a little bit. And it's like I had not put words to it in this way, but like data have a voice,
Yes.
and what do we do? Do we listen to that voice or
Yeah.
do we ignore it? And obviously, we as human beings have the opportunity to contextualize around it, but there
Mm-hmm.
is a voice there. That's a beautiful way to put it. So now you're in consulting. Now, what firm were you with?
Charles River Associates. So they're
Okay.
based out of Boston, and it was a very boutique, I guess, as
Mhm.
opposed to more general or business consulting. And a couple of years in, I felt like it was a bit too niche,
Mhm.
where all the data analysis were very similar, perhaps different type of data, obviously, but very similar themes. And I wanted to learn and grow more. So I was exploring either going to a different practice internally that was in labor, but you know, as a labor economist, it was really hard to make the case to do something else that I may not seem as credible as labor economist in labor. So I ended up actually going to Deloitte when they were setting up a kind of SWAT team, I'll call it, focusing on international tax optimization. So they had a team of PhD economists, tax attorneys, JDs, and then MBAs, and we would work together to come up with creative plans to structure a company in a different way to optimize their taxes globally. So
Mm.
very different where I got to learn about new data sets, financial statements. That's kind of all I worked with for a very long time there, and away from the people data. So I had to learn a lot of things really fast and certainly exposure to different industries.
Mhm.
I never forget the day, of course, this is probably just a typical day, but I remember on a Friday morning getting a call saying, hey, we want to go pitch this client on Monday morning, get on a flight. And in the meantime, get to know everything about this company in a brand new industry you've never heard of, and come up with a proposal that they're going to buy for seven figures. So,
Yeah.
that's the kind of environment that I feel like we had to learn how to collaborate really effectively because the teams were still lean, lots of smart people, but then also quickly figure out who's good at doing what. And in the consulting world, it's also very flat, right? It's not kind of hierarchy that you see in corporate world. So it's not clear. It's all up to you to figure out who is good at doing what and sort of figure it out once you get the project. So I think there was a lot of different learnings along the way, in addition to the technical kind of forecasting, financial data, and so on. Reading lots and lots of 10Ks day in and day out. But then also the team culture piece and figure out what works. So I always think a lot back to those days when the structure wasn't clear. How do I, as a leader, create that clarity that my team members could benefit from?
Mm.
Or when do I actually not do that? So that intentionally I'm creating an environment for learning, and organically find out who might be good at something new. And so I think back to those days a lot when I first became a manager a few years after that.
Yeah, I mean, creating an environment for learning, and to your earlier story, when you were, data don't lie, people lie. It is the case where that's arguably part of our biggest challenge and opportunity in people analytics is create an environment for learning and openness to discover, as
Mhm.
opposed to coming in with our mental models, our
Yes.
predetermined
Yeah.
ways of thinking of the world, and hey, this is actually what's happening, as opposed to what you thought was happening. And if we're
Mhm.
open to being nudged, then good things, creativity can happen. So yeah, you're at Deloitte, and then you go to GE, and then you have several other roles which lead you into PayPal. So as opposed to like going through each one, if you don't mind referencing your experiences, but I want to talk about workforce planning. When
Mhm.
you talk about labor economics, there is a, I don't want to call it a struggle, but there's a defining of what talent intelligence is vis-a-vis
Mm.
workforce planning, vis-a-vis people analytics. So
Yes.
you're educated and experienced on looking at labor markets, and we have external labor markets, and arguably now we have the means in which to stand up and manage internal labor
Yes.
markets or talent markets. And we're doing this at speed, we're doing this at scale, we're trying to do it sustainable ways. So my pointed question is, if you look at talent market analytics or slash talent intelligence, how does that play vis-a-vis people analytics to you? Is it a subset? Is it distinct? What does that look like?
Hmm. I think structurally, it can sit in a variety of different places in the organization. I would say the organization needs to figure out what they need from talent intelligence first.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my experience, it's always been very helpful to get the external market data from this particular group,
Mm-hmm.
and potentially even have them focus on specific research that is tied to whether that's a new domain, for example, that the company is expanding into. Think about where crypto was maybe 3 years ago, right? How do you find talent? Where do you even go? Which schools produce some sort of talent that can do any kind of blockchain? We have no idea, and now we have a little bit better sense. There's still a shortage of talent, and other topics like diversity and inclusion. Where can we go to find diverse talent for a particularly difficult to fill roles? So I think of those opportunities as something that's proper for talent intelligence and less so for people analytics, unless the people analytics organization is staffed up with those researchers who can mine the same data and provide the same insight.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other piece that is a bit unique that definitely sits outside of traditional people analytics is things like job mapping, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, especially for executive research. Now, that said, I have actually experimented with creative approaches, speaking of creativity. And early on, when I first joined PayPal, I have partnered with our executive recruiting team and basically found a way to provide additional candidates using skills. So I can talk about skills for probably 20 hours
Mm-hmm.
itself. But I very much believe in we are now in a place where we need to hire based on skills. We need to promote based on skills. I'll go as far as to say that we need to pay based on skills. And companies have very little and very poor quality data on employee skills today. And so what I brought into the executive recruiting team that complemented their original research was that, hey, there's a lot of candidates who actually have the same skill sets. And maybe I'm using a proxy based on experience. Maybe I'm using their actual skill badges on LinkedIn. Maybe something else. Or maybe it's education, right? So it's a combination of those things and surfacing additional candidates that traditionally are not found. And I think there's a future where I can see tighter collaboration between the executive recruiting team, talent intelligence, and people analytics in sourcing candidates that better match the qualifications and also think about the potential. If you can figure out the adjacent skills or skill sets that are close enough, you can expand your talent pool significantly. And if you want diverse talent, guess what? You got to look broader today. So I think there's a ton of work to be done still. And like I said, earlier days when roles and responsibilities were not clear, I always had to figure out who does what. And it's similar with talent intelligence, people analytics. In my mind, we need to use our strengths. And if my team is better at working through the data manipulation and creating maybe a product that surface insights, then let us do that. If the talent intelligence team is better at looking at external research data, let them do that. But if we have economists on the team who is actually experts at looking at difficult data like census, for example, then let us do that, even though we are not talent intelligence. So I very much focus on skills and relative strengths, especially when we're talking about these potential overlap or close disciplines. And I look for opportunities to collaborate where data can add value.
Well, thank you for sharing that because that is beautifully put. And some questions come to mind because you were talking about people analytics and talent intelligence being effectively two separate groups. Do you see a world where those groups are either part of one kind of center of excellence or center of expertise, or do you think there's value in them remaining separate? And before I let you respond, what I've seen is talent intelligence folks sometimes living in real estate, sometimes living in talent acquisition,
Yeah,
and then people analytics and HR operations over here.
right,
And there's some like overlap, particularly when you have the internal people analytics team focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and internal
right.
mobility. And there needs to be, to your point, some relationship between the two. But is your agenda, whether it be in your current role or maybe aspirationally, would you like to see them closer together as separate, or would you like to see them together? What are your thoughts there?
I would definitely like to see them closer together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's necessary in the same group. However, I would say personally, and this is only my practice, not saying everyone should consider it, I do invite the talent intelligence team, and I consider them our cousins,
Mm-hmm.
to all my team meetings and all the learning sessions where we are exchanging knowledge. And we're starting to see that there's some skills overlap. For example, we found that there's an analyst in talent intelligence who knows a lot of technical skills and wants to learn from others. So then, if they stay only within their bubble, they can't learn from others because they are essentially the most technical person. However, if they chat with my team members, then they get to nerd out together. So I try to create those opportunities where people are learning and growing, whether it's technical or business skill sets that they want. And I think there's just opportunity to think about just the data itself. Like, how can you create a workforce plan without internal and external data? You can't. So put very
Thank you,
simply,
Serena. Thank you.
put very
Thank you for
simply,
saying that.
so then how do you facilitate that inflow, right? And sort of who does what? Then you have workforce planning folks who might be trying to gather this external data from someone and internal data from someone else. And then maybe someone needs to do the mapping, right? For example, a simple question like how many data scientists are there externally in Chicago? What counts as a data scientist? What counts as a data scientist internally? What level is that?
Mhm.
So there are lots of questions where, in my experience, I just pulled a team together. We got workforce planning folks, we got talent intelligence, and then my team members, and we chat about what makes sense for each team member to do on specific projects. So like workforce planning, for example, it really depends on the source data that we're using. Sometimes the talent intelligence team is a true expert in the data they're looking at. Then we stay out of their way and say we will supply the internal data, and then we'll kind of double cross check and make sure we're talking apples to apples. Other times we might be equally familiar because it's a subscription that both teams have or that I'm sharing with the other team. Then we can decide who has more time. So then we'll take it on. And then in advising the workforce planning team, again, using our relative strengths, we really advise on things like predictive attrition, for instance. So if you're using simple modeling and we have a model that's much more accurate, call it, not necessarily advanced, but more accurate, then let us provide you with the model output so that you can forecast the next few years or whatever time frame that makes sense. So it's a collaborative effort. And I would say that I learned a lot about people along this way too, because it's not everyone's cup of tea, this lack of clarity, and having to figure out what everyone does, where it might be a little bit different from one project to another. It takes some flexibility that I think, you would think 2.5 years later into the pandemic, we now all have become very flexible. But some of us are also very tired of change. So I totally get it. But yeah, in my mind, that workforce planning is so important, and a lot of organizations are just getting started. You really, back to our earlier point, need both internal and external data to make it work.
Well, you're getting me all excited because you said a couple things that I want to get into a little bit more. And particularly if I'm listening and I'm thinking about my role in my organization. I could be in people analytics, I could be a CHRO, head of talent, I could be in workforce planning, and then there's talent intelligence. So my pointed question is, what's the distinction that you and your organization make between talent intelligence, workforce planning, and people analytics?
For us, there are three different teams that collaborate together on certain projects. I think the talent, I would say people analytics, full spectrum, from reporting all the way to advanced analytics when it comes to people related decisions.
Hmm.
Talent intelligence focuses more on external market signals that can be brought in to make important decisions too. For example, location strategy. I would say location strategy is probably one of those projects that the three groups partner really closely together, where workforce planning, talent intelligence, and people analytics all have a piece of the pie or puzzle, and we figure out recommendations for the organization on where to go next for talent, where can we stay competitive. And so as you think about the external talent data, it's not just availability of data, it's also things like the cost of labor in different places. It's the difficulty of doing business. And sometimes we sort of help create an index, if you will, of as we're ranking location strategy. So we sort of provide that thought leadership on okay, you have all this external data, there are 20 factors. Are they all the same? Which one's more important? And we partner together to make that happen and make the recommendations. And then workforce planners will, sort of help. Now we have the supply of talent, and then we have the demand for talent, figure out the gap analysis and make recommendations on what's next. So yeah, it's definitely not perfect or easy. I would not say, but it's been a ton of good challenges for us to learn on how to collaborate with each other. And if anyone has figured out the perfect model, please give me a call.
Yeah. Well, to your point, I mean, just I think about the talent intelligence labor market space. It's been around for eons, and it's
Yes. Yeah.
however, the ability, meaning the number of data sources and the speed in which that insight can be surfaced, is truly somewhat revolutionary over the past 10 years and really over the past 5. It's been
Right.
pretty extraordinary, and there's a host of products and solutions out there that are laying evidence to this, and there's a lot of money going in the space. So my a couple quick questions, because we could talk about this topic for the rest of the day, and I want to get to some other things, particularly about the future of people analytics and workforce strategy and workplace strategy. But it's this: is that what is the governance among those three? Is there formal governance, or just the leaders of those teams having the willingness and ability to collaborate? Are you all within HR? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we're all within HR, and then we connect with each other regularly. So it's sort of informal structure, but I would say because we have very strong project management teams for every project that we kick off, we do talk about that roles and responsibility. We're racy upfront to see who makes the calls, and so that it's at least clear, especially if we need to switch out, team members, like someone goes on vacation, we're not having this conversation over and over again.
Got it.
Yeah.
And this is a bit of a sidebar, but related. Do you have a set of deliverables that you contribute to your quarterly business reviews?
Uh, Gosh. So we provide. Yes, and then sort of depends on the business. So of course our business does the review with our CEO, and we have over time provided various suites of dashboards focusing focusing on different components. So we call it org health,
Mhm, mhm.
and it's really giving you a sense of how healthy is your workforce internally. But we've started to this year bringing in external benchmark as well on things like attrition, so we know how we're doing, and that's been well received. And I think the reason we provide that dashboard to enable self-service is not because we don't want to provide manual data. Obviously that's a huge plus, but also every business might have a different focus on their talent strategy, on their workforce strategy, and so perhaps diversity and inclusion is something that is the most important, or perhaps it's something else. So we don't determine what those most important metrics are for them and just rearrange the scorecard every month or every quarter, but they get to decide, and we just provide a scaled platform where they can find that information. I do hope to get to a place where that organizational health is a bit more standardized, where we talk about things like spans and layers and location footprint and things like that on a regular basis. So I do think we are working towards a standard view after several months of debating what is more important, and kind of just in the meantime I said, look, you can find what's most important to you, but let us know what's important so that maybe we can create a view that works for most people, and then we can standardize going forward. So
Got it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's you're getting an executive team aligned on what's important,
Right.
and it's obviously a challenge in and of itself. And if you're having an organizational health dashboard, I don't know if
Yes.
you term it as that. I mean, that's a very good place to be, relatively speaking, because many are still,
Yeah.
guessing. And even if you don't have, perfect understanding of what organizational health looks like,
Right.
having something is better than nothing, arguably. And that's what I'm hearing that you all are
Definitely.
doing.
Definitely.
There's a couple of things that I want to ask about, and then I want to get to some rapid fire questions. But before this, I mentioned workforce strategy or workplace strategy, and we've touched on this. But as we go into 2023 and we're thinking about the future of work and different ways to structure an organization, org design, and the use of contingent labor, outsourced providers, this whole ecosystem in which work can get done. What's top of mind, particularly with the role of people analytics in informing what's possible? So how do you create space? You mentioned at the outset, space for learning. How do
Yeah.
you do that? What does that look like from a meeting rhythm? Like, who's your audience to consider these ideas, consider the data and insights that you're producing?
Yeah, so definitely our HR leadership team. I think that's a really critical audience. And then we have certain business leaders who are just really interested in people analytics, and they are champions of our work. And they find us when they're curious about something new, or maybe a report they have seen on the topic. So it kind of goes both ways. I would say that upskilling is certainly on a lot of leaders' mind. Going into a more difficult economic downturn with a lot of uncertainties, it's on a lot of people's minds on how do we, if we are unable to, let's say, backfill as quickly as before, or backfill every single role as before, or if the market becomes even tighter and we can't find the talent we need quickly, how do we upskill our internal talent to be able to do some of that? So kind of going to the buy versus build strategy. But then now we have lots of options, right? We have buy, build, we have bots. How do you think about automation to help with some of that? So those are regular conversations that I think people analytics needs to help organization think about. It's not just backfill, it's not just your attrition rate, but as you are thinking about that role, what does it do? And how can automation help with some of it? Is it if we can backfill with a different level of role or in a different location, perhaps that can save the company a lot of money if you get the automation to work to remove all the manual tasks. So it definitely requires a different kind of rigor that we may not always have. And I don't think we can have on every single role. That's always my reminder to everyone who's getting started in workforce planning or skills is don't boil the ocean. If you're trying to workforce plan every single job at your company, forget it.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't, right?
It
So
could.
Yeah, so you want to boil down your jobs to skills and then maybe even to task ultimately. Sure, that all sounds good, but let's not do that for 2,000 jobs because it won't be feasible. Focus on the critical ones, the ones that are either impacting your top line or bottom line. Can you, if you get this workforce planning right for this particular role or set of roles, are you going to make more money either by generating more revenue or saving more cost, or
Mhm.
somehow increasing your market share? Pick one. But if
Right.
it doesn't impact your business metric, then I will question the value of doing a long exercise that is very data analytics heavy, and doesn't result in ROI quickly. So
Yeah.
that would be my reminder. Definitely don't boil the ocean. Pick something that has business impact for sure to get started.
Well, a couple more quick questions, then we'll start to wrap here. Just before we leave that topic, what's the frequency in which you have those types of discussions? Is it like once a month? Is it once a quarter? Is it once a year? Like when you're looking at the ecosystem of how work can get done?
There's an ideal way I would say I want to do that, and then there's the reality as
Yeah.
well. So I would say ideally I would recommend at least twice a year, if not 4 times a year. Quarterly would be ideal. Depending on the size of the organization, some of the metrics may not change that quickly. So if it's a also very stable industry, for us, we have been going through a huge transformation. So it's been a little bit more frequent. So sort of after a big change has come, or we are expanding to a new business, and those are kind of the moments where we have to have in real time conversations about what does the talent look like, and where can we go after this, and how can we quickly fill these a new office that we're expanding into, and so on. So I think for us, this year has been unique, but generally, definitely recommend 2 to 4 times a year would be a good rhythm.
Love it. So, what excites you about the space moving forward? Or concerns you?
Ooh, gosh, a lot. I wish there were more people analytics professionals to do the work. I've been on a journey to get other analytics professionals to join people analytics just as a secret passion. Well, I guess no longer secret. But I've hired internally actually a couple people from our finance group and just show them how cool people analytics is.
Mhm.
So I think I'll continue to certainly do that. Where I'm very interested in building a collaboration model with other analytics organizations, both internally and externally, because I think there's so much we can learn from each other. Think about marketing and customer analytics, and that parallel with people analytics. There's so much that we can learn from each other, and potentially even tie the data together to see whether or not things like employee experience impact customer experience and so on. So very much looking forward to that. I would say, you can probably tell from all my LinkedIn posts that employee well-being and health is very important to me. Coming out of the pandemic, certainly have seen firsthand from many people I've talked to, it's top of mind, and there's a lot that data analytics can help with. But if you don't have data, also don't get discouraged. There's a lot that you can do, and just being more human to your team members, and show up at work, and all the things that are free, like being vulnerable, right? Being authentic, being inclusive, that doesn't cost anything, and it's great to practice. And I think those are key ways that we can really improve the employee experience. It's not about getting a better laptop. It's these human connection moments, and creating more of them and making them better.
Yeah. No, beautifully said. And yes, employee well-being and creating more inclusive environments. I couldn't celebrate more. And we have a unique role in our discipline
Yes.
to
Yeah.
shed light on not only what's happening, but what will help improve these outcomes. So yeah, thank you for your passion there, as well as doing the work. And so yeah, may we continue on that journey together. So
Of
you ready
course.
for some rapid fire questions as we start to wrap?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Favorite genre of music?
Jazz.
Jazz. Nice. What type of jazz, or just all jazz?
Oh my gosh, actually kind of all jazz, but there are a couple clubs in Chicago that I really like, and one I've supported throughout the pandemic by making donations to their virtual concert. So yeah, yeah,
Well, I know what we're doing next time I'm in Chicago. So
sounds good.
all right. Who are professionally, and it could be personally as well, but I'm really curious professionally, who has been an inspiration to you, either going back years or currently?
Definitely my graduate school advisor, Donna Ginther. She was just a trailblazer, and even years ago, there were almost no women in economics, and she was able to show me how wonderful data analytics can be in applying to useful research like gender equality and really advancing that cause. So still very much think of our time together and all the encouragement she has given me over the years.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. And what do you do for fun?
I stay very active, so I continue to learn a lot of new things. Tennis, golf are on my current list. Not very good at either yet, but that's okay. And yeah, yoga if it's too cold outside. So
All right. This one is a toss up. So thank you for sharing about, your interests. So if you were going to advise someone to learn about people analytics or workforce planning or talent intelligence, what would you recommend? Or do you want me to answer that?
I think you should answer that, and then I can go.
Well, there's this LinkedIn course that I'm
Yes.
aware of. No, I'll let you say. So you just
Yeah.
tee up your LinkedIn
No,
course.
for sure. Yeah. So for sure, check out the data science of using people analytics. It's actually being selected to be part of a really special new learning path called Future Proving Your Organization. So it's free until the end of November. So check it out. Now is your time. And then tell me what you will like me to do for the next course. Because I'd love to do a continuous series on people analytics and just bringing what's new, what's relevant to the world continuously. And certainly follow me on LinkedIn and check out my newsletter as well. I'll continue to share insights.
All right. Well, Serena, thank you for sharing again. Thank you for being who you are and your commitment to not only people analytics, but to well-being and inclusion and equity. And just, it's fabulous getting to know you over the years. And, yet again, I appreciate you sharing with me and our audience. And you be well. And I'll see you there in Chicago, if not before the end of the year, then certainly early part of next. All right.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
All right. You be well. Thank you. Thank you for listening today. If you want to learn more about today's guest, go to pafal.net. You'll be able to see links to the bio as well as to the video of today's program. You'll also have the chance to support this podcast and other shows that we do by becoming a PAFAL community member. You can also donate if you choose. What will be helpful to support PAFAL, the People Data for Good movement, and me will be to share this episode with friends, coworkers, and others who might find it valuable. Finally, for updates on upcoming episodes, shows, and events, please subscribe to our newsletter at pafal.net. At the bottom, you can also see our social media presence. So please subscribe to our company page on LinkedIn, follow us on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. We're active as can be, and we want to provide this content to you that is timely, relevant, and actionable. So again, thank you for listening today and hope to see you soon. I also want to give a shout out to Jenna Dern, Malaz El Sheikh, and Sarah Sparnan, who without them, this show would not happen. And now go out and make some great things happen.